Hey everyone, welcome back to Clarke's Closer Look. I'm Marcel Clarke, and a couple of weeks ago we talked about how hard it is to detect ovarian cancer. But this week we have a very special guest who's aiming to solve that problem. Dr. Heller is incorporating AI technology to detect ovarian cancer symptoms before they even start. We're talking about years and into the early stages. The very cool thing about all of this is that this detection tool could be out and saving lives in just a couple of years. Dr. Heller has been working very closely with the MSK Cancer Center, along with the Ovarian Cancer Research Alliance. I hope this conversation brings you a lot of hope, and I cannot wait to hear your thoughts.
I want to thank you so much for being here today. You have an extensive background, so tell me about how you got to where you are today and pretty much in your fight against ovarian cancer and finding solutions for it as well.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's great to be here. Yeah, my background is never really pointed me directly to ovarian cancer until the last about 10 years. I spent a good amount of time in Texas, actually. I was doing nanotechnology research there. Then I went and did my PhD in chemistry from the University of Illinois, where I did more nanotechnology and nanosensor research. So nanotechnology is a study of really tiny materials. And then I did more training at MIT in biomedical engineering. And then when I began my research career at Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, I hadn't been in the area of ovarian cancer yet, but I quickly ran into a gynecologic oncologist, a physician who studies or a physician who studies and works with patients with ovarian cancer. And he said, we have a real need in ovarian cancer. We need better ways to detect it. And because my background was making new technologies to detect disease, I said, "Great, I'm on the bandwagon of trying to detect the disease early." And so that was over 10 years ago. And
Wow.
since then, my lab has really dedicated a lot of its time, and really I had to learn about ovarian cancer very quickly, and have learned a whole lot. And now a lot of my lab works on ovarian cancer detection and to make new ways to detect it early. Which, if you can detect it early, it's so much more treatable, so much easier to potentially even cure it.
And that's where we're kind of headed in this way because ovarian's so hard to detect. And you're using both AI and nanotechnology to help identify this cancer before it even appears. I read that this can go as far as years before you even have symptoms, which is wild and incredible. What sparked this idea for you, though? How did you come to using something so complex till this point, AI right now, with detecting ovarian cancer?
My lab has been originally it was working to detect known biomarkers of ovarian cancer, but do it better. And eventually we realized that the problem with the known biomarkers of ovarian cancer is they're just not good enough. Many people might know about CA-125. It's a protein biomarker of ovarian cancer. And it is very useful, but not useful for detecting it early and finding a way to catch the early stage cancers. And so we realized that the main issue is that there's not a good enough biomarker for ovarian cancer for early detection. So we realized that part of the technology that we've been working on in my lab could be used to find disease when we don't know what the biomarkers might be. And the way we did that is we used really a way to we made our material our technology into something that kind of works the way the nose works to detect smell. So instead of recognizing certain smell molecules and saying, "Oh, this smell equals this smell molecule," it uses what's called perception. So it's that there's many different odor molecules that stick to the many different sensors in the olfactory receptors, we call them, or at least the people who work on that call them. And there's many different odor molecules. They stick to these sensors and make a pattern. and there's not one-to-one specific recognition between one odor molecule and the sensors. It's that there's many molecules, they stick to many different receptors that all have kind of not so perfect specificity to certain molecules, but it creates a pattern, and your brain interprets that pattern as a smell. And
Wow.
that lets you take maybe the body has about 400 different sensors, receptors for smell, and your brain can interpret the just with those few sensors and can distinguish a trillion different smells.
Incredible. So pretty much picking up a pattern. And how soon can we, how, like you said, you can detect this for years before. How many years are we talking about?
What we've done so far is we use this our technology where we basically built our technology around the idea of can we detect ovarian cancer in patients who we don't know what the biomarker might be, but
Yeah.
let's try it out. We have these sensors. We basically introduced blood from ovarian cancer patients to these sensors, and we asked the question, which is there a pattern when from the binding of these sensors that we made that basically change color when something sticks to them. By all of the blood from these patients sticking to these sensors change basically the optical signatures, basically colors and intensities of these sensors. We use that information to plug into an AI algorithm to say and ask and told the algorithm, well, these were the responses, was the data from the patients who had cancer, and these were the ones who didn't. Can it tell the difference? And on the first try of kind of doing this, or the first real try with a few hundred patients, we could detect it better than CA-125.
Incredible.
And so that was what we had so far. Now we're asking a couple questions. One, how early can we detect it? Can we detect it really early in patients who have early stage ovarian cancer? But also, can we detect it in patients who may get it because they have some sort of what's called a precursor lesion? And so similar to in that people might know about this in breast cancer, there's something similar called DCIS, ductal carcinoma in situ, where there's this kind of precancerous condition where people who have it have a higher risk of that turning that tissue turning into cancer. There's something similar in ovarian cancer, and it's called a stick lesion. And so a stick lesion, STIC, is basically a precancerous lesion, precancerous tissue, usually on the fallopian tube that has a high risk of turning into cancer. And so what we really would like to do is find the people who have those lesions, but without taking tissue and doing a biopsy, which is invasive, but just by looking at their blood. And so that's what we're really trying to do now, is to see when does someone have an increased risk or high enough risk of ovarian cancer where they really should do something. And there is preventative surgery. There's something for them to do if people have a risk factor. They can get what's called a salpingectomy, which is basically just the fallopian tubes are removed, and that can really decrease the likelihood of a patient getting ovarian cancer, even though the ovaries are still in place and the uterus could still be in place, even just taking out the tubes, because it turns out that ovarian cancer is now known to really, for the most part, at least the main type of ovarian cancer that's also the most deadly, it can start in the fallopian tubes.
I feel like that information is not out there as much with the fallopian tubes. A lot of people think with the uterus, or like you said, the ovaries as well, but there's been great results with that as well. I think there's not a lot of people who are dealing with ovarian cancer, and sometimes a lot of survivors whom I've spoken to say they feel very isolated when it comes to hope. To bring up kind of hope that there are people like yourself trying to find solutions for them, how soon could we see this detection tool in the market ready to be in use and potentially save lives?
So we're working on now then validating these results and making them even better. So right now, this research is going on really as quickly as we can in my lab. And so the hope is that in the next 2 or 3 years, we could have at least the kind of the major clinical trials happening that could validate this. But it'll still be this at the clinical trial stage. It's hard to say exactly how many more years after that. Hopefully, just a few to a product could be approved. And so and it usually happens quite a bit faster than with drug therapies, these kind of diagnostic tools can usually be approved faster. So because oftentimes drugs might be 15 years out. So this is definitely faster than that, but we're thinking that in the next 2 or 3 years, we're starting a big clinical trial that could move to an approved product. It is possible that in certain centers, before even a kind of an FDA-approved product is approved, it is even possible for diagnostics to be approved by even the state level to actually be used in individual centers. And so we're looking at that as well. But I'm on the research side, not on the kind of the regulatory side, so I don't know everything there.
Yeah.
But we're really trying to push it as fast as possible. And one of the slow things is that ovarian cancer is relatively rare compared to many other kinds of cancer. So we need samples from patients to be able to get them to use that, and we basically use the samples in order to make the sensing technology work. So we're trying to accrue these, and it doesn't happen super fast. And so we're working with several medical centers, including ours, to get these samples as fast as possible. And that's what takes some of the time to do the validation of this technology.
Yeah, no, understandably so. I was going to ask you as a researcher, what is your biggest hurdle when it comes to testing out your work? Is it, the lack of patients in this case for ovarian cancer, the funding, the time? What do you run into?
It's a little bit of everything, but certainly, especially when I started doing this work, it was there are few abilities to, or it's difficult to fund this kind of work. There are great foundations who are doing some of that work, but they're not nearly. They always can do more, and they're really trying to expand this because this is just a huge need to get the funding to do this kind of work that's difficult to do, takes a long time, takes a lot of effort for many people, and so it's the funding to do that, and also the funding to move this to a commercial technology also is scarce. Sometimes, even if you have great data at an early enough at a certain stage, getting companies or potential funders of companies to take a risk to fund a company to do this is also very hard. Often because in diagnostics, especially it's harder to get funding to do that work because you need so many patients to really prove that something really is going to move the needle and change people's lives. But you don't charge very much for diagnostics. It's not like some drug therapies, so it's always difficult. And so we're really trying to do this as best we can with the funding that's available to move this into a clinical stage commercial technology so that everybody can have access to this.
And oftentimes with a conversation of cancer, chemo also comes up. And obviously we've seen a lot of Americans go through just the grueling process of chemo and it breaking down the body to attack not only the bad cells, but the good ones as well. Do you see nanotechnology or AI also advancing chemotherapy for Americans or just people in the world for it not to be as intense on the body when they have to go through this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So the hope is always to build better and better drugs, better and better therapies that enable people to take drugs that aren't the kind of the older school of chemotherapy that really cause a lot of the side effects that people know about. But even some of the newer drugs cause big side effects, and the hope is that it's worth it, that those drugs like immunotherapies can then cure the cancer. And so people building and making new drugs are always looking at this issue of how do we make sure that this drug is going to be beneficial for a patient and not cause too much harm, and so only looking out to get rid of the cancer, but the patient really matters a whole lot. And people at my institution and others are really and also in people who are making new drugs are really looking at this very carefully. With AI and also with kind of sensor technologies and like what we're trying to do, we want to ask questions like, can we decide before someone gets a drug, is there, even if there's not a genetic marker that we can see yet that tells you whether someone's going to respond to a certain drug, can we use other methods like these sensors, these perception-based sensors, or AI based on many other markers or patient information? If that can be plugged into AI, sometimes AI can see patterns that we couldn't see ourselves, where there's so much data, there's so that you can get from a patient, and there's so much data we can even make sensors to do or collect. If AI can help us make sense of that and see a pattern where it's just so hard to see patterns in a haystack of data, that can really make a big difference in allowing us to find new knowledge to help drive us to make new drugs, or even decide which drugs are going to be the best for certain patients. So there's really a lot going on the AI side alone, AI with data that already can get from patients, and also AI with things like the sensors that we're developing to be able to ask questions like, can we develop better drugs? And can a certain patient take a drug when maybe we wouldn't have given it to them, or maybe tell us, no, they really shouldn't get that drug because it might cause a harmful side effect.
Yeah, it's almost like AI is another pair of eyes looking over that patient that you're observing.
Or maybe a lot more eyes.
Yeah, no, we need all the help we can get, especially when it comes to, health. How do you see, just moving forward, AI and the medical world working hand in hand? Has there been any hesitancy from certain physicians when welcoming AI tools into their facilities?
So I'm not a physician. I'm a scientist, though. So I'm not doing the work on my own with the patients, but certainly when the physicians that I talk to normally day to day are also physicians and scientists, and it's just, to me, when I talk to my colleagues, just very obvious that they see that for the most part, AI is going to change all of our lives in many different ways. And from a physician standpoint, I believe from talking to them that they see these kind of the idea that AI can see patterns that we just can't do with our brains, and so for making new drugs, for deciding on treatments for patients and deciding what to do, to reading data that we normally would have read with our eyes, like pathology scans, tissues, radiologic scans, PET scans, that AI can maybe spot things that one pair of eyes can't. It can see something that based on so much data that came before it, that was used to program the AI algorithms, it can see these patterns and find things that humans weren't able to see. And so doctors are going to be able to use more and more powerful tools to help them diagnose patients, to help them treat patients, to make new drugs so much better.
Wow. And doctor, before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add, or any information that could help you, that someone watching could, sign up for either a study or bring in more information for your research?
So one thing to mention about ovarian cancer specifically is that there's certain symptoms, common symptoms to watch out for, and so there's lots of information on the internet that in reputable places to find this, but certainly people that have abdominal bloating, feeling full feeling full too fast, or abnormally fast after eating, abnormal weight loss, pelvic discomfort, back pain, fatigue, changes in urination or bowel habits. These are some of as well as abnormal bleeding. These are things that if they persist for about over 2 weeks, to watch out for, and to talk to a doctor. And so definitely those are things and there's the places that I look for this kind of information are usually the Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation and Tina's Wish, two foundations that look at this, that really talk to patients about this a lot. But in general, I think there's just so much more needed to improve diagnostics and treatment of ovarian cancer. It's not funded enough, and so there's great foundations like the ones I've mentioned, and others that are funding this work, and that's really helping really move the needle and build better ways to detect cancer and treat it.
Well, thank you so much for that information. And we look forward to see what unfolds with your research, but incredible work that you're doing, Dr. Heller. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.